Sony studios have been making a habit of late to release big updates for their titles that increase performance, visuals, content and more. This week Guerrilla threw their hat into the ring and it's a monster. Guerrilla remain one of a packed set of top tier studios within the PlayStation portfolio, and Horizon was a huge hit for them within the PS4 generation. The sequel released last year made huge improvements from a technical perspective, even on the PlayStation 4 and the Pro. But the PlayStation 5 remains the pinnacle of the team's technical accomplishments, not content with improving almost all areas with 4K resolutions, 5 times faster loading, higher quality materials, improved lighting. They also managed to squeeze in a 60 FPS performance mode. And as we covered before launch, it really offered a choice between the 30 or 60 FPS fan base. Although the pre-launch code we had did improve significantly through the review period and beyond, this performance mode certainly had a lower image quality than the 30 FPS mode. Without the ability to cover all versions until last week's announced and released 1.16 patch, many tweaks were made to this since then, reducing the sharpening filter, changing some effects, but the main issues remained, which was a heavy amount of high frequency flicker on thin edges, specular highlights, and something the game is chock full of: foliage. Those sub-pixel areas cause the screen to shimmer and flicker as you move the camera or walk through the world. Some areas are better than others, but when you are surrounded by flora and fauna, bright lights and SSR reflections, it can become overwhelming for the TAA to resolve, and as such the image can become quite unstable. The larger the 4K screen, the more obvious the issue becomes, and until this patch that remained true. I can confirm though that this update is very impressive indeed, and stands as a case study in practice that time and skill are the most prized assets, as the work done here appears to have come with vast improvements and no negatives, even more so from the pre-launch code we covered. So what has or hasn't changed then? Not the resolution, that remains the same dynamic 3200 by 1800p output it was back then, but the construction of that output has certainly changed. Before this patch, the performance mode used a checkerboard method to achieve its output, and one of the main issues, I can gather at least from this type of analysis, is that prior to this patch it was also used on alpha transparencies and effects, e.g. the foliage, the explosions and other effects were also checkerboarded back. This half width caused obvious grid-like shimmer as pixels popped in and out of existence per frame, which you can see from this slowed down side-by-side footage. The relatively low TAA that only takes a small sample from a previous frame does not have sufficient data to resolve this, and it would soften the image more anyway. With this patch though, which I can only surmise at this point, the team have changed elements of their checkerboard resolve and the TAA, which look to split out the alpha and effects from its post-process pass, being cleared of those checkerboard resolve issues and then applied to the buffer prior to it hitting the screen. My educated guess here is they are rendering the effects at a relatively higher resolution than before, but not checkerboarding them with the rest of the image, thus these can be cleaner and more stable, and more importantly, they work much better with the TAA pass as they have far more information to work with. The result is they are far more stable and practically resolve all of the issues we saw before. In fact, the results now are so good that Guerrilla join Insomniac with the best of both worlds patch adage, as the new performance mode is so close to the 4K fidelity mode now at 60 rather than 30. I suspect that those who had to choose between 30 last time due to the IQ issues would almost certainly not hesitate to pick the 60 FPS now, as the results are clear to see, quite literally. In gameplay, comparisons, cutscenes, LOD, geometry, effects, etc., I can see absolutely no cost to this increase aside the team's time and effort. And as I always say, this reinforces how much better the same hardware can be utilised once teams can understand it more, tailor their engine, and remove the need to ship a final product within a finite development cycle. The stark contrast here is replicated throughout the wider and later sections of the title with no cost to performance either, as you can see here, which is already better anyway in patch 1.12 than the review code we tested back then. The only minor change I could note was the alpha particle effect from those red flowers does appear to be reduced, but this was a major offender in those eyeball assault areas anyway prior to this. And SSR reflections and other post effects still appear to use a checkerboard resolve, showing a striped pattern not visible in the fidelity mode. Again, very minor, and almost certainly 99.9% of players would never notice it anyway. The fact that nothing here affects performance is a real testament to the efforts here, and now we get a practically locked 60 FPS through some of the same tested sections that I could see dips in our review code. And this also explains why the title does not support VRR on PS5, even with the force mode turned on in the operating system menu. From my test here at least, it would be a redundant feature, as it's simply not required when you can hit your target even easier than before. The title also received further updates in addition to this visual feast, with Game Plus modes, new outfit options and reskill changes within the hierarchy process. If you were sitting on the fence about diving back into Forbidden West, then this update has all bases covered, and Aloy and crew have never looked so good. You could say you would be foliaged to not give it a try. Sorry, I'll get out. Anyway, before I go, this was just a quick look at the improvements offered from Guerrilla and incredible results that they've got out of the exact same hardware. And basically showing that they took all that fan feedback on board and acted upon it to create a very impressive update on the PlayStation 5 and managed to improve on an already impressive PS5 title. And I cannot wait to see what's next from the team. If you like this deep dive technical and game related content, then keep it IGN and we'll have much more just over the horizon.